Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, boaters, voters, and red-hatted gloaters, welcome along to the Joe Spivey YouTube channel, where we discuss books and little else. And holy moly, pudding and pie, heavens to Murgatroyd, Donald J. Trump has won a stonking majority to be president in the United States of America. Those words have passed my lips. That is utterly, utterly unbelievable. And if you have come for some sort of liberal breakdown, or meltdown rather, if you're expecting me to whiz, pop and bang with fury, then that's not going to be the case, because I've already gone through 3 stages of just horrid grief. I indeed stayed up to watch the entirety of it, fueled with caffeine and all sorts of other barbiturates, and it looked to be going well in Georgia until it wasn't. It looked to be going well in North Carolina until it wasn't. It looked to be going well in Pennsylvania until it wasn't, and so on and so forth for the remaining swing states. And again, I'm not going to... there have been a great deal of, what should we say, contorted diagnoses given out, all sorts of spurious autopsies given. I'm not here for that just yet. There's anti-incumbency could be adduced, and social media channeling your very reality, and indeed a love on behalf of a great many Americans, I believe, for their enemies to be slaughtered on the White House lawn. There's all that to be considered. There's a love of Donald Trump abroad, even though the only thing that's missing, I've realised when I watched his victory speech, the only thing that's missing from Donald Trump is a hospital gown and a teddy bear, and a kind of a hurried lab assistant running after him saying, "Oh, patient 383 has finally got out." He really is a lunatic, but I'm not saying anything new here. What else was I going to say? Oh yes, there has been a refusal on behalf of Donald Trump's team to sort of adduce any positives of the Trump presidency. It is remarkable, is it not, folks, that even the victors, the majority of the victors, are still very, very angry and still loving the fact that there has been, as it were, a sort of a touted liberal meltdown. That shows that even at its electoral zenith, the Trump movement is typified by a sort of red-eyed fury and a sort of adrenalized, revanchist need to shake up the snow globe. So those are my opinions. This is a serious remark. This is not done in jest or in humour. If any of you in Arizona, in Washington, in Boston, in Minneapolis, in Tennessee, if any of you need housing as a result of autocratic tyranny, goodness me, Kingston upon Hull in the United Kingdom is there is a citizen here that is more than happy to house you. There is no problem whatsoever. There is another story which ought to be the second largest in Britain behind the presidential election at the moment, but which is getting absolutely no coverage whatsoever. You will know that in the past I've made no bones about my sudden anti-monarchical tendencies and my desire to guillotine the royal family when I do assume my own dictatorial power. But there has been some remarkable work on behalf of the Sunday Times and Channel 4 dispatches to enlighten the public and to reveal certain, shall we say, financial misdemeanors on behalf of the exalted people themselves, via the Duchy of Lancaster and the Duchy of York, which of course are via very, very strange legal trickery and chicanery, are not classed as corporations and therefore are not subject to levied taxes. Essentially, what has been revealed lately is that William and indeed his father, the crowned Charles Mountbatten, have been using their land, which of course is manifold and vast, and have been profiting from public companies such as the NHS and a great deal of others, military campaigns and naval conglomerates, who have been using their land and have thus been charged and have thus been enriched as a result of the public purse. And given that Keir Starmer and his sparkling spectacles, and Rachel Reeves and her wonderful dresses, and Angela Rayner and her sort of jaw-swinging trips to Ibiza, which have cost the taxpayer, I think, in total about £30,000 or £50,000, have been the subject of intense scrutiny. The idea that the royal family have benefited to the tune of 50 million over the course of 10 years, you would think, would you not, folks, that that would be peppering the headlines. But indeed, It is not, but believe it or not, we do indeed have something of a book review to get to you, because once I went from disbelief to disconsolation to sort of, shall we say, sort of vigilant resistance with the Donald Trump administration, I indeed got back to reading, and yeah, I've got the second of my my three reviews of Ian Kershaw's abridged biography of the tyrannical autocrat Adolf Hitler. And yeah, I've got 4 or 5 sections that I want to read out, but what is dealt with in here is Hitler's expansionism, essentially, his need for Lebensraum, his militarization of the Rhineland, his interest in the so-called what should we say, the lineal Germans in the Sudetenland of Czechoslovakia, then the Anschluss in Austria. I think I've got those two events mixed up, hasn't I? You have the Anschluss in Austria first, for which he is reverentially congratulated, and then the move into the Sudetenland, the freeing of the Sudetenland in Czechoslovakia. You've got Neville Chamberlain, who and President Daladier, I think it was, of France, who have been reviled in historical reports and shown to be limp-wristed. You nearly use the word peacemongers there, but you know what I mean. What's the phrase that's usually used? The phrase is going to evade me at this very, very crucial moment. But essentially, they've been labelled as very weak characters who miscalculated Hitler's venom, which is the case, but also led rearmament programs and did a great deal to at least delay and trammel something of Hitler's expansionist tyranny, and as I say, laid the platform for the Churchillian verbosity and resistance that would come in subsequent years. That pretty much covers it. Then you've got what were we talking about? The horrendous anti-Semitism that stalked the land, and the ways in which Hitler managed to okay policies without actually putting his name to any of them, which of course is one of the reasons why otherwise exalted and praiseworthy historians such as David Irving have fallen down the rabbit hole of Holocaust denialism, or at least of ambiguity regarding Hitler's intentions and governmental policies. And yeah, so it talks about anti-Semitism and the rise of Heydrich and Himmler, but then you've got with his foreign ministry with von Ribbentrop, Joachim von Ribbentrop, and we're really talking about the same, and alluding to the same people that featured heavily in The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich by William Shearer. Shearer is referenced a few times even in this book as a first-hand American journalistic viewpoint. But you've got, I mean, who have we got? We've got Goering, we've got Goebbels, we've got Himmler, but then we have the slightly minor figures as well. We've got the Raiders, the Hadlers, the Von Becks of the world, a great deal of other people who play parts in this heretical, this horrendous pantomime that so ensorcelled the German public in the 30s and the 40s. So yeah, I've got 4 or 5 sections that I want to read out. We end really in the dramatically accelerated seizure of French land and and Dunkirk, and how, if Hitler had been just a little more bullish, he could well have swept up some of the 250,000 folks that were rowed back to the British Islands. If indeed he hadn't been stopped, then he might well have, as I say, swallowed those up and thus hampered the subsequent revival of the British Empire with the help of Roosevelt in America, when you burger-addled sods over in Yankee Land eventually stuck your fingers out and came to help us in continental Europe. So yeah, a very, very good section. Kershaw is a brilliant writer at times. There is a little bit, as with all complex writers, there's a little bit of overreach occasionally, but you can always tell as well stylistically the period. You can easily demarcate when Kershaw began a section and when he when he was typing for perhaps 2 or 3 hours, when he was regurgitating his note paper work, and you can see the sort of the last 300 or 400 pages where he really wanted to stick it to us readers, where he really wanted to create a kind of splendorous summation of all that he'd been speaking about before. You can see where he starts and you can see where he finishes, and that's actually quite sort of endearing. You can see where he's trying to work us, and you can see where he's just giving us the factual heft. So yeah, I'm finding his company really, really nice. So I've got a few sections to read out. The first of which concerns the the very, very, or at least, yeah, surprising and not often dwelt upon fact that a great deal of the captains of industry and cultural leaders, CEOs, university executives, intellectuals, scientists, general, yeah, as I say, captains of industry, bent the knee just as deferentially as some of the Nazi Gauleiters did, and how it was very, very easy for Goebbels and Hitler to contort the national psychology. Much the same applied to the broad cultural sphere. Goebbels took up with great energy and enthusiasm his task of ensuring that the press, radio, film production, theatre, music, visual arts, literature, and all other forms of cultural activity were reorganised. But the most striking feature of the coordination of culture was the alacrity and eagerness with which intellectuals, writers, artists, performers, and publicists actively collaborated in moves which not only impoverished and straitjacketed German culture for the next 12 years, but banned and outlawed some of its most glittering exponents. The hopes long cherished of the coming great leader eradicated the critical faculties of many intellectuals, blinding them to the magnitude of the assault on freedom of thought, as well as actions that they often welcomed. Many of the neoconservative intellectuals, whose ideas had helped pave the way for the Third Reich, were soon to be massively disillusioned. Hitler turned out for them in practice to be not the mystic leader they had longed for in their dreams, but they had helped prepare the ground for the Führer cult that was taken up in its myriad form by so many others. That is, by turns mellifluous and sort of stylistically active and really energetic, as I'm sure you'll agree, but also very incisive and granular, and it really gets at the issue. Next up, we have something of a summary of Hitler's daily life. He was not one for bureaucratic concentration. He didn't pore over the statistics and the textbooks, and he had an ever-shrinking circle of acolytes, and yeah, he was not your ideal head of government by any stretch of the imagination. A lot of people, I think, have something of a what's the word I'm looking for? They are misinformed in thinking that Hitler, whilst being a raging anti-Semite, somehow was also a brilliant leader and was able to craft a fine economy and a brilliant rearmament program and cultural hegemony, and that is the case to some extent, but it was largely done as a result of people who gleefully took up his message, and very little of it was done from the Berchtesgaden or the Obersalzburg or wherever it was that he happened to be sleeping. Gradually, however, any formal routine crumbled. Hitler reverted to the type of dilettante lifestyle which, in essence, he had enjoyed as a youth in Linz and Vienna. Later on, recalled Wiedemann, this is an insider who essentially goes rogue later on, Hitler appeared as a rule only just before lunch, quickly read the press summaries provided by Reich press chief Dr. Dietrich, then went to eat. It became, therefore, ever more difficult for Lammers and Meissner to acquire decisions from Hitler which he alone as head of state could take. When Hitler was at his residence at the Obersalzburg, it was even worse. There he invariably left his room only approaching 2 p.m, then it was lunch. The afternoon was mainly taken up with a walk, and in the evenings, straight after the evening meal, films were shown. The walks were always downhill, with a car stationed at the bottom to ferry Hitler and his accompaniment back up again. Hitler's detestation of physical exercise and fear of embarrassment through lack of athleticism remained acute. The whole area was cordoned off during the afternoon walk to keep away the crowds of sightseers eager for a glimpse of the Führer. Instead, the tradition set in of the visitors' march past. Up to 2,000 people of all ages and from all parts of Germany, whose devotion had persuaded them to follow the steep paths up to the Obersalzburg and often wait hours, marched at a signal from one of the adjutants in a silent column past Hitler. For Wiedemann, the adulation had quasi-religious overtones. Hitler rarely missed his evening film. The adjutants had to see to it that a fresh film was on offer each day. Hitler invariably preferred light entertainment to serious documentaries, and, according to Wiedemann, probably gleaned some of his strong prejudices about the culture of other nations from such films. And that's what you want, really, is it not, from the biographer? You have to remember that... I keep getting hairs in my mouth. I have to remember midway through reading this that it's not really a charting of the geopolitical channels that led to war. Of course, you cannot omit those. You cannot ignore those sections if you're doing a biography of Hitler. But you also need to know what conserve he spreaded on his toast, what was the strength of the ply of toilet paper, how many hours of sleep did he get per night, all of the quotidiana which indeed contribute to one's governance and to one's worldly comportment. And it's those are invariably the sections that that intrigue me most. Next up, we're talking about what was referred to as what was it called? It was the working towards the will of the Führer, and how, as I say, he didn't really need to commission an awful lot of the crimes that went on in Nazi Germany, and could rely on underlings who were just as radicalised and anti-Semitic, if not more so, who would, as I say, fervently carry out such heretofore unrecognised heinous acts that would have made, Charlemagne and Genghis Khan blush with their moral turpitude. In fact, he had little to do or nothing to stir the escalating campaign against the Jews. Others made the running, took the initiative, pressed for action, always, of course, on the assumption that this was in line with Nazism's great mission. It was a classic case of working towards the Führer, and those are in quotation marks and are often in this book, taking for granted, usually on grounds of self-interest, that he approved of measures aimed at the removal of the Jews, measures seen as plainly furthering his long-term goals. Party activists in the movement's various formations needed no encouragement to unleash further attacks on Jews and their property. Aryans in business, from the smallest to the largest, looked to every opportunity to profit at the expense of their Jewish counterparts. Hundreds of Jewish businesses, including long-established private banks such as Warburg and Bleichroeder, were now forced, often through gangster-like extortion, to sell out for a fraction of their value to Aryan buyers. Big business gained most. Giant concerns like Mansmann, Krupp, Thyssen, Flick and IG Farben, and leading banks such as the Deutsche Bank and the Dresdner Bank were the major beneficiaries, while a variety of business consortia, corrupt party functionaries and untold numbers of small commercial enterprises grabbed what they could. Aryan pillars of the establishment, like doctors and lawyers, were equally welcoming of the economic advantages that could come their way with the expulsion of Jews from the medical and legal professions. And there you have a blend of ideological certainty and just haphazard, lackadaisical, personal, individual opportunism, which led to the expulsion of Jews. And then we've got the idea that Hitler accelerated the war in light of his own mortality. Numerous sections in here highlighting that Hitler very much wanted to become world king and regarded as the greatest German ever to have breathed oxygen before he passed. And so, knowing that he could not take on the might of Britain and the Western powers until 42 or 43, nonetheless pressed on into Poland and into France and into the Baltic states of Denmark and Finland, needing all of the Swedish ore. So external pressures of the course he had embarked upon met Hitler's personal psychology at this point. At the age of 50, men frequently ruminate on the ambitions they had and how the time to fulfill them is running out. I'm starting to sound like a kind of corner shop owner in South Yorkshire, aren't I, with a slight stutter. For Hitler, a man with an extraordinary ego and ambitious to go down in history as the greatest German of all time, and a hypochondriac already prepossessed with his with his own approaching death, the sense of aging, of youthful vigour disappearing, of no time to lose, was hugely magnified. So that pretty much covers our coverage of Kershaw's biography to date. There is also a great section on, I believe, a man called by the name of George Elser, who, unbeknownst to a few of the conspiring sections of resistance, mainly in the army, unbeknownst to all of those, acting entirely of his own sort of personal convictions, nearly perpetrates a successful assassination attempt on the dear leader. He places a time bomb into a pillar behind which Hitler is meant to be speaking, but because of declarations of war and the need to address a war council, Hitler leaves the meeting earlier than he should have done, and therefore the bomb goes off just minutes after he vacates the venue. I think 16 or 17 people are killed, many more injured, and again, one of those sliding doors moments. Had Hitler stayed in the building for another 15 or 20 minutes, had his rampaging monologues sort of meant that he strove on and continued talking for 15 or 20 further minutes, we might well have been living in a very different 20th century or whatever. We might not have had the ruthless barbarism of Stalingrad or of Normandy or of the Battle of Britain or whatever. So yeah, those sliding doors moments, the apprehension of historical contingency are writ large in this, and it's magnificent. Considering it's a 1,000-word book, it is not intimidating me whatsoever. So yes, I'm approaching my stipend of 20 minutes as per usual, my prerogative of 20 minutes, and so I'm going to down the book and yeah, announce that we live in a much different world today, folks. And yeah, I don't want to warble anymore on recent matters, and would just like to ensconce myself in regular reading and ignore the kind of the screams of the outside world. So yeah, I'm probably going to cap this video at 20 minutes, and as usual, BookTube, thank you ever so much for watching, and say goodbye.